Hello everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey everybody, Cantonese Cat here. I have been on vacation for the last week and a half. I have not been here making videos for you all. A lot of folks apparently, according to my friend Danny here, he says that a lot of middle-aged men have told him that they listen to my voice to fall asleep. And I'm some kind of like ASMR or something. I don't know. It's really weird, but I've kind of already kind of shied away from making videos every day just for the sake of making videos. I think when I first started about say closer to how many months is that? 22 months ago. When I first started my channel, I was a little bit more vigorous to try to make my voice heard. I was trying to make more like daily videos, or at least like maybe 4 or 5 different videos a week to trying to get the algorithm going and whatnot. And I was just doing technicals for technical's sake. Since I've been really shying away from that, I've been more doing this thing where I would talk a little bit more and make a video if I have something more thoughtful to say and I want to look at an overall picture. I want to do comparisons. I want to think about it from a higher time frame. I want to think about it from a more bird's eye view here, look at the macro as well, looking and see what is going on, rather than just going into the stock. You just start talking about it using various technicals, which I don't think is as helpful as the kind of videos that I'm making now, at least for myself, right? With that said, yes, I was on vacation. Yes, I was posting a lot of pictures on X. If you don't follow me on X already, you should do that if you want to hear what I have to say or keep track of what I'm doing. I was in Greece and I didn't want to come back. I was basically not bringing my laptop on purpose, and I decompressed. I completely decompressed right now. I came back and I'm a little bit jet lagged, so I'm sorry if I say something wrong, but I want to start out with this thought here. Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin doing? If it was any other assets other than Bitcoin, this is a bullish event. I know, I'm just a blind bull, and the 4-year cycle is over, and everything is approved that the bull trend is exhausted, the bearish divergence is working out, it's going to go down a lot lower from here. Well, that's what the prevailing point of view is right now. A lot of people have developed a very bearish sentiment. Even those people who actually secretly feel bullish, they may not tell you so because it's not cool to do that anymore at this point. They are hedging. They make some statements that are bullish. They make some statements that are bearish, and they will go back and claim and try to claim credit for whichever one that worked out at the end. For me, I'm going to stick with my thesis. I'm going to share with you what I think. And I'm going to go through logic and basically go through what I see here from asset to asset to asset that has behaved very similarly, except this is Bitcoin, and whenever it decides to break the 20-month moving average, have a leg up higher, and finally backtest the 20-month moving average, apparently this is bearish for Bitcoin. I'll show you why people say that, but is this really a bearish thing whenever things behave this way, right? Break out above the 20-month moving average, backtest the 20-month moving average. What has done that recently? Well, Nvidia, breakthrough, have a leg up, back test the 20-month moving average, holding that just fine, another leg up after that. If you're looking at other assets like Google, well, it even broke down underneath the 20-month moving average. The next thing you know, it just made a parabolic move on the way up. There are a couple of other ones here. A recent trend that I saw the same thing. Iron had a move up, even broke down underneath the 20-month moving average. That was just a liquidity grab, and a big giant explosive move has happened after that, right? Cypher did the same thing. It actually broke down underneath the 20-month moving average after having a mediocre leg up here, got close to the low bullish band, and just exploded on the way up, right? With very decent bullish band expansion. Let's look at a little bit more of like a large cap stock like Apple. Bouncing off the 20-month moving average on the way up is not a bearish thing. Sometimes you do break down, but sometimes you're leg up bouncing off the 20, you can actually have another leg up, right? This is something that can happen with stocks. This is not something that is necessarily nasty or bearish. Sometimes on Microsoft, it just have a leg up and then it just had to get close to the 20-month moving average before going up again. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a bear market. when you're touching the 20-month moving average. So why do people think that whenever you're touching the 20 moving average, so you're going to have a bear market for Bitcoin? Because that's what it's been doing for the last 2 cycles. There's a very, very limited sample size from the past. The last cycle, it has gone through with a full Bollinger Band expansion, a huge move on the way up here, a little bit of exhaustive move on the way up here. And because of this big, giant, huge move with full Bollinger Band expansion, a lot of people get really euphoric, even over here, including myself a little bit back then. And once it decided to touch the 20-month moving average, because of such a big, exhaustive move, it decided to break down, touch the lower Bollinger Band, and the rest of history, right? That's the bear market right there. Now, same thing happened over here in 2015, 2017 bull market. As it enters 2018 bear market, you have the touching of the 20-month moving average. Now, this is the context of having such a big move all the way from 170 or something like that, all the way to 20,000. That's a big, giant move that had just happened. Same thing here. It has just moved from around 3,000, 4,000 or up to about 60, 70,000. That's a big move that is just made, full bunch of expansion on both. And then whenever it touched 20, because of such a big move it made, finally exhausted, easily broken down underneath the 20-month moving average. And same thing here, right? Easily broken down the 20-month moving average and continuous bear market. Here, we have finally touched the 20-month moving average. Is it going to behave like the previous and the previous time? Well, I would argue a couple things. One thing would be that because this bull market really hasn't been that impulsive, I don't think the crash is going to be that bad. Could it touch the lower Bollinger Band at 50,000 if this is the bear market? Yeah, maybe, right? But it doesn't always have to do that. Here, it didn't even really touch the lower Bollinger Band here at all. Now, to also make another statement to compare between the two, sometimes you can have big move like you did over here in 2018 all the way to 2019, where you basically have a 4x move from about 3,000 all the way to around 12,000, 13,000, right? This is a big move that is just made right there. And it decided to touch the 20-month moving average, and for the most part, it's actually holding that area here and getting ready for the actual big move for the cycle, right? Could this move over here be an exaggerated version of this small move over there, which is not so small? You have 4x here, you have 4x here. Maybe this is representative of something very, very similar between the two. Maybe you're touching the 20-month moving average to kind of take a break before moving up higher. Maybe this is what it represents, right? We don't really know for sure, but that's one possibility. I also want to bring on your attention to something very similar that happened with another stock. This other stock is called Nvidia. People talking about the 4-year cycle. As far as I'm concerned, I think this is just a liquidity cycle, because on the left right here is Bitcoin, on the right here is Nvidia. You can see that they basically behave very similarly here. About Bitcoin cycle ended up in around December 2017. For Nvidia, it kind of made a little exhaustive top here all the way up to 2018 or so. But for the most part, it follows very, very similar peaks, follows very similar bottoms over here. And I really think that the 4-year cycle for Bitcoin is more or less a liquidity cycle. I don't necessarily think that it has to do much with halving anymore, because the impact of halving is probably not that much on the price of Bitcoin as much as it was before. Now, what you're seeing here, again, left side is Bitcoin, right side here is Nvidia. If you just kind of focus on Nvidia here, what do we see? Well, even looking at the past, right? Looking at the past here back in 2016, it touched the 20-month moving average. Does that mean that this bull market is over? No, that's when the real bull market begins, right? This is just a little bit of a tired move over here. You can see how, I'm just going to line these up over here. You can see the similarities between the two areas over here, right? This area over here, a little bit of a peak over here, touched the lower Bollinger Band, decided to reclaim the 20-month moving average, a little bit of a tired move over here. Very similar to what Nvidia is doing right over here. It makes you wonder sometimes when stocks are behaving this way, and if it doesn't die, you can actually end up plummeting all the way back up in a hurry. I don't necessarily think that this cycle is over just based on some of these technicals that other people are showing, with the exception that, again, this is Bitcoin, where it touched the 20 moving average. Is supposed to break down. Well, did it over here? No. It did over here, sure. But there are examples where it doesn't always have to play out that way. The other thing I also want to bring to your example is, bring to your attention is this. Okay, so after this bounce of the 20-month moving average, Nvidia went on a big, giant, explosive move, kind of like Bitcoin back in 2015, 2017. Nvidia ended up crashing from here all the way close to the low Bollinger Band over here. And whenever it ended up touching the 20-month moving average, it just couldn't hold because it was just a big, giant, explosive move up, right? That basically was behaving the same thing as Bitcoin right around the same time. I think it's all tied to the same liquidity cycle. Guess what Nvidia did here? Back in March 2020, it touched the 20-month moving average. It did not die, and it bounced off and make another move on the way up, right? What did Bitcoin do at the same time? The same thing. It basically kind of closed the month here below the 20-month moving average, but that was just a liquidity grab. Next thing you know, it just went a lot higher. Guess what happened with Nvidia here, right? Broke down underneath the 20-month moving average. Whenever it touched it, right? Bear market. Here, same thing. Broke down underneath the 20-month moving average. What happened? Bear market, right? Same thing happened with Bitcoin. Well, guess what happened this cycle here so far? Nvidia backtested the 20-month moving average here, and it held. It was a positive sloping 20-month moving average. Decided to hold it and make another leg up here. What do we have here at Bitcoin? Well, we're finally touching the 20-month moving average here for the first time this cycle. Doesn't mean that it has to die. Well, Nvidia didn't die, so why does Bitcoin have to die? Right? It's one of those things that you kind of have to look at the technical by itself, looking at what the overall market is doing at this point in time, and try to figure out what is actually the thing that you would be thinking here. Same thing with QQQ, right? QQQ had touched the 20-month moving average over here, found support, and it just went up and a lot higher. Over here, we finally touched the 20-month moving average here for Bitcoin. We did not do that here during April when QQQ did that, when Nvidia did that, and when IWM is basically just crashing down all the way down to low Bollinger Band. So you have the stock market just behaving extremely poorly back in April with the backtest of 20-month moving average. When Bitcoin was having a green candle, it was just basically looking like it was showing relative strength over here, right? So what I'm trying to say is this. If Nvidia, during the last two cycles, whenever it touched the 20-month moving average, it crashed down, but this cycle it hasn't, it actually bounced off of it, that tells me that I think the liquidity condition is different here from where we are at from previously. I do think that there's a lot of correlation between Nvidia and Bitcoin in terms of the technicals here. And for whatever reason, this time they are a little bit out of sync. And I can try to argue the reason as to why that is because of rotation. They are trying to show some relative weakness over here. For Bitcoin, they have some relative strength. For a stock like Nvidia, some relative weakness. They're trying to make you, force you to say, hey, stocks are not behaving as strong as Bitcoin. They're showing some relative strength. Why don't I rotate to Bitcoin? And next thing you know, Nvidia has shown relative strength afterwards, and Bitcoin is showing relative weakness. Right? This is exactly what happens to get people off sides because the liquidity condition is there to push stocks and crypto higher potentially, but at this point, it is just a slow burn and is rotating between different assets, and they are respectively touching the critical support. Nvidia held. We'll see whether or not Bitcoin holds. That is the message here. Another thing that people are going to talk about over and over and over again on YouTube, on X, on wherever it is that you hear about Bitcoin is this 50-week moving average. Same thing, right? Once it breaks below the 50-week moving average, last cycle here, and have a bearish backtest, that's it. That's the end of the cycle. You have another leg down. What did we just do? Well, we touched the 50-week moving average here twice, and finally break down. That's it, right? Bearish backtest, plummet all the way down. That's the prevailing theory. Guess what's happening this cycle here that hasn't really happened during the parabolic move over the last two cycles? The parabolic move over there did not even touch the 50. Of course, when you touch the 50, you're going to plummet and die, right? Because it's such a big exhaustive trend on the way up. Same thing here, big trend up, touch the 50, another exhaustive move up. That's it, that's the end because you have a big giant move that just happened. Here, it actually touched the 50 multiple times on the way up here. it's actually respecting the 50-week moving average here very, very well, which is unlike these parabolic moves over here. It breaks down underneath of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of the world. I also want to show you the 20-week moving average here. Now, the last cycle over here, 2015, 2018, 2 cycles ago, I should say, it was extremely touching. It was extremely hugely velocity to the upside here, because it was just basically bouncing off the 20-week moving average on the way all the way up here, right? Here, it didn't even touch the 20-week moving average. Of course, whenever you break down underneath of it, you're going to be extremely exhausted. Here, you've just been hugging the 20 and the 50 on the way up. This is extremely healthy. This bull trend is unlike any other bull trends in the past. This is extremely healthy behavior for Bitcoin. If it's extremely healthy behavior for Bitcoin, whenever it ends up touching the moving average down below, you might actually have a chance of holding the next level down below. Now, what is the next level down below here? Is the 100-week moving average. Currently, it's holding a 100-week moving average like a champ. Now, it is forming a bear flag. Could it mean that it could go down? Yes, it's plausible. How often do these bear flags work out? Where according to the traditional source here, bear flags sometimes it works out probably about 2/3 of the time. So you have a third of a chance that it doesn't work out. That probability is not that great, I guess. But the only difference is this. This is also behaving a little bit different compared to the past. Here, you did end up breaking down. You didn't really touch the 100-week moving average. You just kind of trying to push through the 50, and it just ended up breaking down over here. This cycle, forget about it. Whenever you just, breaking down to 50, you just break down 100 just like that. This is a little bit different because it's holding a 100-week moving average, consolidating here a little bit, forming a little bit of a bear flag. I gotta say, you could have a leg move on the way down here. Why do I think that this is not necessarily going to play out? The reason why I don't think it's necessarily going to play out is this. Look at Nvidia, what happened before. This is the 50-week moving average before, right? Whenever it ends up, breaking down here in this cycle, that's it. That's the end of it, right? Same thing. Whenever it ends up breaking down, that's it, right? Well, guess what happened over here? You broke down, but that didn't die. It just ended up pushing another leg up higher. So what happened? Let's put up the other moving averages over here. Let's look at the 20-week moving average. During this bull cycle is very similar to Bitcoin. It was really hugging the 20-week moving average. Here during the cycle, yeah, it was kind of doing that. 20-week moving average is being respected. Same thing here. But what's really more important is the 100-week moving average, which I'm going to show here for Nvidia. Here, it just ended up breaking down underneath the 100 like it's butter. Here, it just ended up breaking down underneath the 100-week moving average here like butter. Here, it actually held the 100-week moving average here relatively well. It bounced off of it and pushed through the 20 and the 50 here. Are we having a very similar setup here with Bitcoin and Nvidia? I'm seeing a lot of similarities here. I'm going to even zoom in here for a little bit, right? Now, this is Bitcoin. I'm even going to try to make it, relatively time frame wise very similar. Here's Nvidia. Here's Bitcoin. Bitcoin broke down underneath the 50 and the 20. It's holding 100 here. It's been holding here number of weeks, number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Nvidia broke down underneath, touched the 100-week moving average. How many weeks did it kind of hang out between the 50 and 100? Weeks number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Before pushing back up here again. Are we at a juncture where Bitcoin is complete dead? Not necessarily. If the liquidity conditions are very similar between Nvidia and Bitcoin, and it's been showing during previous cycles that they're extremely very, very, very similar. I just showed you all the moving averages, just show you the timing of it, of all these different bear markets. They look extremely similar, with the exception, I think this time you have a little bit of rotationary force here. I think market makers may be trying to throw you off sides here, trying to get you away from Nvidia into Bitcoin. Next thing you know, you just hammer Bitcoin, right? When Nvidia is already kind of pushing out into a renewed bull market. It is what it is. It is what it is. I'm not going to say too much about it. All I'm saying is that I see a lot of similarities between Nvidia and Bitcoin. And I think that there's a big rotation going on between crypto and between stocks. And what they are showing with relative strength may not be relative strength. What they're showing relative weakness may not be relative weakness. I think they just need to be deleveraged. We haven't really had significant Bitcoin deleverage until just now. You finally have the sentiment horrible. You finally have open interest actually looking healthy for Bitcoin. So as far as I'm concerned, this is still a healthy deleveraging if it wasn't Bitcoin. If people don't look at a past cycle and say, you break down underneath the 20-month moving average, you're dead. You break down underneath the 50-week moving average, you're dead. If it's a 4-year cycle, it goes beyond 4 years, you're dead. I don't really see it that way. I was scared over here for Nvidia. It ended up proving me wrong and just making another lick up higher. I'm going to be a little bit skeptical about Bitcoin breaking down based on current liquidity conditions, right? Now, just look at what I'm showing you here, like 20, 50, 100, 20, 50, 100, Nvidia, Bitcoin. Very similar juncture. I'm not saying they're going to work out the same, but I see a lot of similarities between these two different, stock and crypto here, and that they could be, subjected to very similar liquidity conditions. Last time, again, if it breaks down below the 20, below 50, below 100, that's it, right? They happen in very similar manner. I think there's a lot of correlation here between the two that a lot of people may not even be paying that much attention to. Now, I spent 20 minutes talking about Bitcoin and Nvidia. Let's talk about other things here. Bitcoin and IWM. IWM is the Russell 2000 ETF. Russell 2000 is, unlike the S&P 500 and QQQ or NASDAQ, these are larger cap stocks. They move the overall market. We're talking about the small caps here. Russell 2000 is the small cap representation. These are going to be more high debt. These are going to be more economically sensitive. These are going to be very sensitive to liquidity conditions. Guess what's also sensitive to liquidity conditions? Bitcoin. Bitcoin and Russell 2000, for the most part, has some pretty decent correlation. Whenever the Russell 2000 ends up breaking a resistance zone and enter all-time high, that's when Bitcoin also has this full-blown expansion and has this parabolic move of the way up, right? Same thing happened over here last cycle. Whenever you have a breakout over this resistance zone over here and make all-time highs for IWM or Russell 2000, Bitcoin also begins its parabolic move phase on the way up here with full-blown expansion both to the way up and to the way down. Well, what's going on with IWM? We haven't really truly had any breakout into all-time highs until the last month or two. And guess what Bitcoin is doing right now? We have a Bollinger Band contraction when it's trying to touch a 20-month moving average. Bollinger Band contraction before the breakout, maybe. Bollinger Band contraction here before the breakout, maybe. Bollinger Band contraction here before the breakout here, maybe. We will see. I just think that liquidity conditions, if is behaving very similar to the previous cycle, it should help up Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is still right as support. I've got to say, when things are as support or when things have broken down underneath that during two previous cycles over here and over here, I can see the argument of people getting scared. The market makers can also see the argument of people getting scared, and I think a lot of big influencers are also scared and telling you to be scared, when I think this might be a setup for something that's bigger to come. I don't know, right? But that's just one theory here. The other thing too is this, and this, again, all these are just theories. I'm just talking, I'm just yapping. All these different things are theories, but another theory is this. Bitcoin here on top, the Hang Seng Index basically is the index that is open for a lot of stocks that have listing in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and that's going to be the majority of the big Chinese companies. So this is actually a good way to look at Chinese liquidity overall. And if you're looking at the Hang Seng Index here, what you're seeing here is this. I draw these big arrows that are correlating to the previous big movements, right? Big parabolic move up, big parabolic move up. Here you have the Hang Seng Index making 2 years straight on the way up here, but Bitcoin has really barely budged. If anything, I think Bitcoin is getting a little bit tired over here. Doesn't mean that we are done with having Chinese liquidity coming in. Is this top the same top as this one over here? I would argue that we are not. The reason why I argue that we're not is this. Whenever, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit more for Bitcoin here. Right? Whenever we end up having that higher high over here in November 2021, when people are thinking that it's going to go a lot higher, Hang Seng Index already showing significant weakness and breakdown. Right? Slight higher high here, global liquidity conditions already going down. For how many months straight? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? 9. Right? So whenever you have the November 2021 top, the Chinese liquidity is already leaving. Here is just forming a bull flag. Here is just consolidating after this big giant move up here. It's just consolidation over here. It's not breakdown. So I don't really see these two being the same liquidity conditions between the two, right? And also imagine it ends up breaking through this bearish trend line and it just keep pushing up higher. Maybe that's when you have the explosion of Bitcoin continue to go up. My question to you is this: do you think the Chinese market, are they going to stop printing money because they're experiencing inflation? Or are they going to keep printing money because they're experiencing deflation and they're trying to print themselves out of it? But I think the answer is that they're experiencing deflation still and they're trying to print themselves out of it. I still see that there is, it's a very different liquidity condition over here at this top, right? You can see that for sure. Here, very different, right? Very, very different liquidity condition on the way up. So as far as I'm concerned, I still think that liquidity is entering the system, but maybe it's consolidating here and Bitcoin's taking a break during this consolidation. That is my theory. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is this. This is Bitcoin dominance. This is basically showing the percentage of the cryptocurrency market that belongs to, Bitcoin versus other cryptocurrency. They're not lined up exactly the same, but hey, just keep cutting some slack here. Sometimes it's hard to do that. All I'm really trying to show you is this. They're lined up more or less, the same. What I'm really trying to show you is this. During the parabolic movement for Bitcoin, you have a drop of Bitcoin dominance. Before that happens, you have an initial drop here, and then things kind of consolidate sideways over here for Bitcoin dominance and for Bitcoin here before the real move on the way up. When you have Bitcoin dominance dropping, Bitcoin can also go up very exponentially, but there's a lot more liquidity being flooded both into Bitcoin and altcoins. This phenomenon happened during the past two cycles. You're talking about cycles, about how it behaves in the past, about how it breaks down underneath the 50-week moving average, that's it. How it touches the 20-month moving average, that's it. Well, there are a few things here from cycle analysis here that is very unusual for Bitcoin for the cycle to be over, right? I just showed you Nvidia liquidity seems to be there. I just showed you Chinese liquidity seems to be there. And here I also am showing you that I don't think that we've really had that rotation out from Bitcoin into altcoins quite just yet. And I don't know when that's going to happen. All I'm showing you here is that the cycle generally doesn't end whenever Bitcoin dominance is near its cycle top. That is literally all I'm trying to say, right? The Bitcoin bull cycle does not end when the Bitcoin dominance is nearest top, right? You have a little bit of a dip over here, but I don't think that's it. Like, we really haven't truly had that rotation into altcoins. We really haven't truly had that euphoric phase of liquidity coming in. So even if the bull market is over, and I'm open to the possibility of that, even if the bull market is over, I would argue that the bear market is not going to be that bad. And there's a possibility that this is a correction right into support and that this is just cooling down before the next move, which Nvidia did. It's not just Nvidia. I think it's also it also has to do with, like, small caps. It has to do with a lot of other things I'm looking at. I wanted to show you this comparison here with MicroStrategy here on the left and with the IWM here on the right. Basically, I think they're going through some very, very similar corrections here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a big consolidation zone over here. There's a big consolidation zone over here. Have a big giant move push up here, and it's basically backtesting that area here. It held for IWM. Maybe it's going to hold for MSTR over here. And whenever things was looking great for MSTR back in April, you have that green candle over here with a trident bottom over here. It looks like there's a trend reversal here. That's when you have IWM just completely plummet all the way down. So a lot of retail was caught off guard. I remember a lot of people were selling small cap stocks like Iron, like Cypher, like whatever, like SoFi. SoFi went all the way down to $8 or something like that during that time. because stocks were doing horrible here back in April when Bitcoin is actually holding extremely well and MSTR is actually holding extremely well, right? And now you're getting punished for it because you're deleveraging. A lot of people are over leveraged over here on Bitcoin and MSTR. They buy, double leverage MSTR, MSTX, whatever. They buy another stock here. What is that? The other stock called that everybody was kind of hyping up back in April? What was that stock that everybody was really excited about when the IWM was going down, plummeting all the way down to like 1,700 from like 2,500, right? They're buying the stock called Metaplanet. Metaplanet held very well, and it actually pushed up extremely well over here. That's when the opportunity is not there, right? When everybody's kind of talking about it and saying, oh, it's showing relative strength. Guess what the Japanese version of Metaplanet was, right? 350. Do you really think that this is a good spot to buy whenever things just move from, I don't know, like 14 yen or something like that all the way to 1,700 yen? Like, is that a good spot to buy? Probably not. There's a little bit of rotationary forces over here. They're trying to trick you into buying strength, right? Everybody keeps on talking about buying strength, buying strength, buying strength. Well, liquidity is coming, but it's just rotating around. And this cycle wants to take its time. That's kind of what I'm seeing here. Now, I'm gonna share with you this other post here. It basically kind of summarizes everything that I've been saying. I'm gonna end the video after that because I'm still a little bit jet lagged. I'm still a bit goofy here. But Bitcoin showing weakness is getting a lot of people feeling very, very spooked about the cycle, about liquidity conditions, and about the overall market in general. Everybody is so ingrained right now in 2025 that they equate liquidity to Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin crashes 30%, everybody thinks that liquidity is leaving the system and the bear market is here, especially when it's correlated with the 4-year cycle. And this is when the 4-year cycle is supposed to end. I have to remind myself that this is just an asset that is subjected to supply and demand metrics long term, but in the short term, it could be extremely manipulated through multiple derivatives and financial instruments. Also, market makers want to deleverage and get people offsides before being able to send things higher because they can take their time this cycle. Things just kind of rotating from one place to another and getting people offsides here. This cycle has been extremely rough to navigate because liquidity rise seems to be slower. It also seems to rotate between different assets to keep people offsides over and over and over again. Keeping Bitcoin weak is actually a great way to suppress sentiment, especially for those who rotated away from the stock market miners back in April in Bitcoin, MSTR, and MTP of Metaplanet due to relative strength of Bitcoin back then. But strength had returned back to stocks just as soon as people mispositioned themselves. It's an overcrowded trade. You're going to get screwed, right? In generally, that's kind of how it works. I'm not saying I'm right or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I'm trying to just figure it out just like you. I'm just trying to find patterns and things, that's all. And that's the kind of pattern that I'm seeing. I don't really buy into the notion of 4-year cycle being a dogma and that has to play out. I still think that Bitcoin is closely intertwined with the market overall. I don't think that's a controversial statement. And because it's intertwined, it's behaving as an asset, and because it's behaving as any other asset, sometimes you rotate into it and show strength, sometimes you rotate it out of it and show weakness. The whole point is to get people mispositioned, and to get people mispositioned means that we no longer have the kind of unhealthy leverage that was there. We end up deleveraging everybody, and the market makers are going to use that as an opportunity to push stocks and crypto from the weak hands to the strong. And those people who end up having the most patience are probably going to get it right. Now, are we going to get it all right for every single asset? No, that is not true. I'm not talking about you're going to be able to get it right if you just position yourself correctly and be contrarian. No. You're gonna bound to get wrong. I'd say you might get wrong like 3 out of 10 times you use this strategy, I generally think that my success rate is probably like maybe 7 out of 10, and like 3 out of 10 I'm wrong. Nobody's going to get it right all the time as far as I'm concerned. That's the reason why I diversify, because something like this happened when Bitcoin goes from 120,000 all the way down to like 80,000, and people get all scared, and I feel just fine, because my major holding is like Palantir, and also honestly it's just barely moved at all. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't really care to buy into the prevailing narrative. And I know what the prevailing narrative is. You know why I know what the prevailing narrative is? Because I have a 70.2k follower account on X. It's growing. I think I'm gonna be a pretty big account moving forward. I don't know what that means. I'm just trying to use that as like a sentiment gauge, if you will. And I do that by looking at people's comments, and there are some really toxic and absolute comments, and they are there whenever sentiment is bad. I'm not popular right now because I'm barely gaining any followers over the last few weeks. I know that. People are not bullish. People are not with the market anymore. I have a friend called Danny Chang. I have a friend called The Great Masby. They have Patreons. People leave their Patreons when things are bad. They come back when things are good again, whenever things go a lot higher. That's just kind of how the market works. I don't think that we are at a point to really truly worry about leverage right now. With that said, do I think that Bitcoin is weak right now? Yes, it is. I am not going to argue that Bitcoin is strong. I'm not going to argue that Bitcoin is strong. All I'm saying is that Bitcoin is at support. All I'm saying is Bitcoin is at 20-month moving average support. If it was anything else, it would be bullish, but because it's Bitcoin, everybody's getting bearish. I can also show you a couple other things too here before I end this about to be 40-minute video here. Is stuck in range right now. I got a daily Gantt chart that has pretty decent market symmetry, following this arc here for a very long time over the last 7-8 months, right? Rejection, push through. It's basically bounced all these Gantt arcs over here very, very beautifully. It's stuck in range over here, right? It's trying to touch the arc where it got rejected. It's stuck in range over here. Look at the weekly here. I got another Gantt chart over here. It's actually a very, very beautiful Gantt chart here that I'm showing here as well. Arc here is resistance here flip into support, right? And we are basically stuck inside of this arc over here, kind of like what we did over here. We did already backtest it once. This is the second time we're backtesting it. Extremely brutal backtest, yes. Are we at resistance right now? Yes. Is Bitcoin showing some relative weakness? Yes, it is. I'm not going to argue any of that. The only thing I would say is that it is bouncing off of support, and because it is bouncing off of support, and because I saw Nvidia doing something very, very similar just a few months ago, I still lean bullish on Bitcoin. Not short term necessarily, but I don't really see anything that would guarantee us moving another leg lower to 70K. Could it do that? Yes, it absolutely can. Does it have to? I would argue no, it doesn't have to, because the deleveraging has already happened. The sentiment reset has already happened. All Bitcoin has to do is to do nothing for another 2 weeks inside the arc over here, and the sentiment is going to stay poor. I don't see people wanting to over leverage into the long side over here so far for Bitcoin. But I could be wrong. I'm just sharing. Again, I'm just another cat, man. I'm trying to figure out all just like you. I'm just trying to find patterns and things. That's all. Right? Thank you so much for listening to this 40-minute video, guys. Have a good one. Bye.